Welcome class, this is Antonio Quirante again, your course instructor. First of all, congratulations on making it through your first week of this course. I think you've been able to get a sense now of the workload that we have before us in the last 4 weeks of this class. So I hope that you can plan your schedules accordingly so that you can get through the required readings and get through your posts on time, of course, and participate and respond to your classmates not just by Monday but throughout the course week. I'd like to first give a quick debrief of our discussions. Again, for the first discussion on separation of powers, last week's video I tried to explain to you the difference between separation of powers and the concept of checks and balances. Still some students conflated the two concepts. So I wanted to give some other examples, because we've discussed some of them in the discussion forum, but just to kind of nail this one away. Separation of powers, again, those are the unique powers of the three branches separate from each other. The powers that one branch are the powers that another branch does not have. And they don't necessarily affect one another. In contrast to that, checks and balances are powers that do affect the other branches themselves. A good classic example is the presidential veto power. So it's a power that certainly that none of the other branches have, but it affects something that the other branch, in this case Congress, does, which is passes laws. So Congress, after the House as well as the Senate passes legislation, the President still has to approve it and can directly affect that action by Congress by vetoing it. On the flip side to that, Congress also can exercise another checks powers that affects the President himself, and that's going to be the congressional override. So if you haven't quite gotten the distinction between those two concepts, separation of powers versus checks and balances, reread some of the course definitions, and hopefully that you can get some a better understanding of how they're different from one another. But be sure to know that they are separate concepts. In our discussion 2 of last week, you were to choose a proposed constitutional amendment and do a pros-cons analysis. I was very happy to see that a lot of you chose different proposed amendments from each other. By far the most popular one was the amendment to the 14th Amendment on birthright citizenship. It was really interesting to see everybody's ideas on that one, as well as the Equal Rights Amendment. A couple of things to keep in mind when you do a pros-cons analysis. No matter how valid your opinion is, you do have to cite your authorities, and the authorities being those that you can find at the online library or those that are offered as part of our assigned sources. So very good pros-cons analysis. What some students will have to work on is getting their authorities to support those ideas, not just in the reference section of the discussion on the initial post, but also in text. With that, I wanted to cover the 2 articles that I have attached to this week 2 instructor video. The first is relevant to, it was earlier this year that this article was published regarding Obamacare and the number of enrollees that were enrolled at that time. And at the time of this article that I've attached, there was some concern that the sweet spot, the age bracket of which Obamacare is going to heavily rely on, the healthy, younger citizens of the United States, was kind of low compared to those that are going to depend on actually accessing the services under Obamacare, which are the older generation of citizens. That article, certainly because we're past that initial point of the enrollees, we're past the formal deadline of March 31st for enrollment of this year. So that has changed somewhat, but it set a good tone of where Obamacare was at the time, and certainly used that article to give some background to where we were at that time and where we're at now past the March 31st deadline. The second article that I've attached to this video message is an article regarding Race to the Top, which is one of the federal educational policies that you really should discuss in your discussions this week. The key point of this article illustrates how with a federal program, like Race to the Top, the challenge is not just getting the program off the ground that's supposed to be specific to your school district, but also maintaining those successful programs when the funding runs out, when you don't get awarded Race to the Top again. So that's an interesting read to give you some idea of the practicalities of these federal programs and the challenges that some school districts are facing after having received the monies, and what to do afterward, and how they keep the students' achievement up. With week 2 now, we have a couple of discussions dovetailing from what I just discussed. You're going to have to talk about some federal education policies. That's plural, that's more than one. So I will be looking for students on talking about No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, and any other federal educational policies of which you're going to have to operationalize effectiveness. What is effectiveness in terms of No Child Left Behind? Is it just students passing the test, or is the actual effectiveness on them being more successful in the higher levels of education down the road? So be sure that you don't give that short shrift, and you do actually talk about effectiveness. You need to define effectiveness for this educational program is, and then cite to your authority. In a similar way, you're going to have to do the same with Race to the Top, another federal program that was enacted after No Child Left Behind. Talk about effectiveness. What was that program supposed to do, and what were some of the pitfalls of its predecessor, No Child Left Behind, that this Race to the Top program was supposed to address? So pay attention to answering that question prompt before you proceed on doing your pros-cons analysis of each of the federal educational policies that you will discuss. The second discussion for this week is you're going to basically be able to learn more about your own House of Representatives district. Okay, so this assignment is one that I think is very, very good to engage the students in learning a little bit more about what's going on in their own backyard, their own congressional district. Be sure to know that we're looking for your House of Representative, federal representative for your district. Some students get it mixed up and start talking about their state's state legislature, where in fact we're looking at the federal level of government in this class, and you're going to look at your House of Representatives representative for your specific district. You'll have to take a look at and explain what are the unique interests of your district. Okay, so some people talk about a city and the specific interests of their city or the specific interests of their state. This assignment is a little bit more focused and will require you to do a little bit more research and cite your authorities, of course, and talk about the unique interests of your district and how your House of Representatives is addressing or advocating for those interests. Also, something to keep in mind, there's a second part to this second discussion that's equally important. You need to talk about the impacts to their representational capacity. Specifically, you need to talk about the things that are impacting how they make decisions. And there's a short list in the discussion instructions for you to go on, and one of the more important ones is whether or not campaign funding impacts their decision making, as well as party loyalty. Are they Republican or Democrat, and does that impact how they make their decisions, and how does that align with the interests of your district? Last but not least, you do have a written assignment due next Monday. This is your first test of how to be responsive to the assignments in this class. Take a look at the grading rubric first and foremost. Take the time to read through it and see what questions that I'll be looking for to be answered in your paper. I find that no matter how many times I say it, unfortunately some students will leave it for the last minute and they won't be able to take a look at the grading rubric, and unfortunately their score on this assignment reflects that. So don't be one of those students. Make sure that you read the grading rubric that's available in our online classroom to see what questions you need to answer. Alright? One other thing that's very important about this assignment, you need to really be careful on what topic that you choose. Your topic that you choose should demonstrate the conflict between the state government and federal government and how they differ in whatever policy you are talking about. So it's very good to try and pick a narrow policy. Sometimes students pick a broad topic like welfare or poverty without talking about a specific policy. A specific policy that would be distinguishable from poverty or unemployment is a federal government program that addresses poverty, like WIC or temporary assistance for needy families. That's a policy as opposed to the problem. So be very careful in picking a policy, a federal policy, that demonstrates a conflict between state and federal policy making in that vein. One of the good examples is legalized marijuana. There are some states that have legalized it, which is in direct contrast with the federal government's law, which is obviously that marijuana possession and sales is illegal. So pick a topic that is an actual policy and something that shows that conflict, the tension between state and federal, or even local and federal government. There'll be a pros and cons analysis, just like you did last week and what you'll do again this week. Pros, cons analysis. Opinions are great, but you need to cite to your authorities where you got that position. Okay, you may already have a preconceived opinion about an issue, but you still need to find some authorities that support it. Last but not least, of course, you must always use APA formats. I can't tell you how many times, how important that is, and how many times students still ignore it. Using proper APA format is just such a fundamental for the university level work that you must take the time to learn the APA 6th edition so that you can score at it competently on this assignment as well as the final paper. With that, I'm available anytime this week. Please feel free to email me or post to the Ask Your Instructor link in the classroom, and I'll get back to you usually within the next couple 24 hours. Okay? Best of luck, and I'll see you in discussion.